Passing myself to the future. I could hardly breathe with the air so thick and humid. The truck air conditioner was once again on the blink, and even with both windows rolled down, it didn't seem to help much. I pulled into a convenience store to buy a Coca-Cola and try to cool down for a few minutes. I was hoping that it might help. From what it appeared to be possible, a heat stroke was coming on. The cool, crisp air rushed against my face as I opened the glass door. I closed my eyes as I walked around, trying to take in as much of the cool pleasure as possible. "I'm sorry," said a young boy's voice as we bumped into one another. I opened my eyes, found both my hands on the young man's shoulders, and I just stood there speechless. Standing before me was a young boy about 10 years of age. My eyes were glued to his facial features, especially his chin. "I'm sorry," said the young boy again. "That's okay, son. My fault for not watching where I was going," I responded. I removed my hands from the boy's shoulders, and I watched him as he walked down the aisle and disappeared around the corner of the shelves. Shaking, I reached down, took out my cell phone, and I dialed my wife. "Hello," she answered. "I need you to come down to the mini market here on the corner right away. Now, it's important." "Hon, it's too darn hot out there right now," she told me. "You have to come, hon, right now. It's really, really important." "Are you okay?" she asked. "I don't know. That's why I need you to come. And come quick, please." I hung up, placed my cell phone back onto my belt, and I walked over to the large plate glass window to watch for my wife. Every few seconds I'd turn around to see if I could see the young boy, but all I could see was the top of his head as he moved back and forth behind the bread shelf. Several minutes later, she drove up and parked directly in front of the store. I walked outside at a very fast rate of speed, and I said, "Did you bring the camera?" "You didn't say anything about a camera." "Yes, I did," I said. "What's wrong, Roger?" she asked me. "Come inside with me and don't say anything. Just look. Don't say anything, okay?" "Look at what?" "Look at this darn boy inside the store." As I opened the door for us to enter, I saw a very strange look on her face. "Please, just do it," I said. As I reached the bread aisle, I stopped and let Judy go in front of me. "Go down there and look at that boy's face, especially his chin on the right side," I whispered, motioning at her with my fingers to move along. She walked down the aisle and stopped beside the boy. She reached out, picked up a loaf of bread, and looked down at his face. I watched her facial features begin to distort as she opened her mouth, which locked in an open position. Waving my hand back and forth, I motioned for her to come back. She just stood there, evidently unable to move. I walked down the aisle, took her by the arm, and began walking her toward the front door. "Is that unbelievable?" I asked her. She just stood there shaking her head. "Is that unbelievable?" I said again, shaking her arm. "There has to be a reasonable explanation," she said softly. "Go back down there and look at his right hand," I said, holding out my right hand for her to see. I pointed to a large scar on the top of my hand located between the ring and little fingers. "See if he has that scar too." She took one step forward and stopped. "Roger, this is really spooky," she said. "Go look at his hand." Slowly, she made her way down the bread aisle. I watched the top of her head as she moved back and forth behind the shelves. About a minute later, she came back toward me, shaking her head. "Roger, let's get the hell out of here." She pushed the door open. "Did he have the scar?" I questioned. She said not a word as she, almost running, made her way to her car. "Did he have the damn scar?" I asked her again. She stood there, slowly shaking her head up and down, telling me that the boy had the exact same scar that I had on my hand. After she got into her car, I knelt down through the window and began trying to calm her down. "Roger, I've never seen anything like that in my entire life. I've seen a lot of people who look like other people, but this is just stranger than fiction. The boy looks exactly like you when you were a boy, and he has the same identical scars as you. How can this be?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out," I told her. "Please go back to the house as fast as you can. Get the camera. Now I'm going to buy the kid a Coke, and I'll have a talk with him outside. I want you to park right over there and take a picture of us, okay?" "I'm not going back inside that store," she said. "I know. Just go get the camera, take a picture, and then go back home and wait for me." I stood watching as she drove away. After her car disappeared around the corner, I walked back into the store and up to the boy. "What are you trying to steal?" I asked him. "I ain't trying to steal nothing," he he responded. Yeah, you are. The boy looked up and just stood there with a guilty look on his face. You're Roger Kaiser, aren't you? I asked the boy in a firm voice. How'd you know my name? He questioned. I know you very well, Mr. Dean, and I know that you're a damn thief. The boy looked down at the floor and said nothing. How about me and you have a Coke with some peanuts in it, I asked him. I like peanuts inside a Coke, he said, rather excitably. I know, I said as I looked down at him. The two of us walked to the large refrigerator, and I took out 2 bottles of Coke. I turned and motioned for him to grab 2 large bags of peanuts off the end of the bread aisle. Nothing was said as we walked to the front counter to pay for the items. After paying, we walked outside, and we sat down on the curb. I opened both bottles of Coke and began pouring the peanuts into the bottles. You ain't gonna molest me, are you? Questioned the boy. No, son, I'll leave that to Mother Winters. You know Matron Mother Winters from my orphanage? I know her well, boy. Hey, you got a scar on your chin just like me. How'd you get that? I was in a... I started to say. How did you get your scar? I asked, changing the subject. I don't know, just one day it was on there and I noticed it. You were in a car accident, I told him. How come you know so much about me? The boy asked. I can't disclose that. What does disclose mean? It means I can't tell you. How come? I just can't, I said. When I looked up, I saw my wife drive into the parking lot. She parked and sat there staring at the two of us. I began talking with the boy as she slowly raised the camera and took a picture. Then she smiled, rolled up her window, and drove away. What's your name? Asked the young boy. Roger Dean Kaiser, I said without thinking. Hey, that's my name too. I know, but yours is spelled K-A-I-S-E-R and mine is spelled K-I-S-E-R. But we still got the first name and middle names too, said the boy as he laughed. I know. I reached over and I patted him on the shoulder. You'll never guess what I have in my right shoe, said the boy. I bet I can, I said as I looked down at his right foot. The boy pulled up his right leg and held it out in front of me. Let's see now. I see a foot. That's stupid. Everyone knows there's a foot inside a shoe, he said jokingly. Yeah, but not everyone can see that great big scar on the inside of your foot where it went through the glass window at the Hope Haven Children's Hospital, can they? Slowly, the boy lowered his foot and began removing his shoe. As he pulled off his sock, I saw the familiar large scar. I had almost bled to death when my foot went through the window while jumping on the hospital bed. I was talking about this here money, said the boy, as he held up an old wrinkled dollar bill. I guess I couldn't see that. I guess my magic's not working today, I told him. I felt the tears begin to roll down my cheeks as I realized that I was seeing and talking to myself as a 10-year-old boy. You're not a bad-looking kid at all, Roger Dean, I thought to myself as I watched the young boy drink his Coke. I remember the orphanage calling me an ugly little bastard so many times that I began to believe it. I looked over at the young man and saw that he was looking down at the ground. I reached over, placed my finger under his chin, and I raised his head. You're a nice-looking boy, Roger Dean, and don't you forget that, I told him. As I let go of his chin, his head once again sank slowly toward the ground. What's it like to have a mother and a father? The boy asked me. I don't know. I'm just like you. I never had a mother or a father. Was you in an orphanage too, just like me? Yeah, I was in an orphanage too, just like you. That must be how come you know Mother Winters. I know the head matron, Mother Winters, like the back of my hand, I told the boy. She's a real bad person and she does bad things, but nobody will believe me. She does real bad things to me. And they never will believe you, son. And there's nothing you can do about that except wait until you leave the orphanage. Then it'll be over. You'll survive, I told him. But she makes me do, the boy started to say. Son, I really don't want to hear it. I really don't. Really, I don't. I watched his head slowly lower and rest on his knees. The Coke fell from his hand and began spilling out onto the pavement. I grabbed the bottle and I set it upright onto the curb. I reached over and began rubbing his back. I knew the sobs were about to start and I didn't know what else to do other than just keep rubbing his back. I knew this young boy had a good heart. I also knew that circumstances beyond his control would soon send him to the reform school, jail, and then finally to prison for 3 years. I knew that one day, many years from now, that he would drop out of school in the 7th grade, yet he would still become a published author. His stories would be published in school textbooks in 5 countries. Through his writings, he would tell the world how terrible it was to live in an orphanage and what it was like to be molested for more than 9 years. That innocent little boy was yet to know that he would be married 6 times, have 5 children, and become a very unhappy man once he grew up. "I wrote to the president and I told him I was real unhappy at the orphanage, but he never wrote me back," said the boy, almost crying. "The president's a very busy man. Maybe he didn't get your letter." "He got my letter all right. Ain't nobody gonna throw away a letter to the president. He just don't care." I looked at the boy, still bent over his knees, having no idea what to say. "Has anyone ever told you that they love you?" I asked him. "No." "Can I tell you that I love you?" "Yeah, but you won't really mean it." "I know, but I'd like to say it anyway," I told him. I sat there for more than 2 minutes trying to tell him that I loved him, but I just couldn't get the words to come out of my mouth. "That's okay, it really is," said the boy as he sat upright. I sat there shaking my head and biting on my bottom lip. "Am I ever going to get to love anybody?" he asked me. "Sure you will. One day you will love your children and your grandchildren and several of your wives too. But that's going to be a long, long time away, isn't it?" "Yeah, kid, but it's better than nothing." "Are girls going to like me someday and not call me a freak?" I laughed, shook my head, and said, "Your day'll come, and you will have your share of the ladies. Most of them will comment that you have the prettiest eyes they've ever seen." He smiled, rubbed his hand across his runny nose, and then wiped it on his shirt tail. "I gotta go now," he said as he stood up. "You got any money I can have?" he asked me. "I got a little money, but you can't have it." "Why not?" "Because you have to continue to be a thief and then go to prison." "Why?" he questioned with a puzzled look on his face. "Because prison is where you're going to find out who you are as a person. It is a place where you're going to learn that you have a worth to the world." The boy reached down, picked up his Coke, and took a big, long swig, finishing it off. He said not a word as he turned and began walking away. 20 feet out in the parking lot, he stopped, turned around, and asked me, "Can you tell me when I'm going to die?" "I don't know the answer to that question," I told him. "The big judge says that I'll be dead before I'm 21. Is that true?" he asked me. "Well, I can tell you that you'll live to be at least 60 years old. That's all I know right now." He shook his head and began walking. I watched him as he got farther and farther and farther away. I could barely see him when I whispered, "I love you, Roger." Way off in the distance, I saw him stop. He turned around, cupped his hands over his mouth, and he yelled back, "I know!"